must have seen so many initiatives where some donation happens. Unless there is a program that is making full use of the money that's being spent, there's no point. And Messi wasn't Messi overnight, right?
Welcome to the Sportsbiz Show. Today we have with us Mr. Varun Achreja, co-founder of World1 Sports and 8-1 Foundation. World1 Sports provides complete solutions for the football industry. Some of their past and current client associations include Delhi Dynamos, Kerala Blasters, Mumbai City FC amongst others. With the 8-1 Foundation, there is provision for sustainable progress with social development taking priority. Today we'll be discussing the business of football both on the commercials and the grassroots side. Let's dive into it. I think I'd love to begin with just understanding the different verticals of World1 Sports and what the consultancy aims to serve.
I mean, we actually do almost everything under the roof when it comes to the sporting side of things, the core being actually football. But it's mainly divided into consulting, development, and talent representation. Those are the three key verticals. And we represent quite a few players in the ISL and the I-League, and we've been doing this for a while. As far as consulting is concerned, I mean, just to put it in a nutshell, it's more towards how we can make things sustainable for our clients, whether it's monetizing and sustaining or creating the pillars that would help them monetize to sustain. And we use a lot of rationales that, your consulting companies also use, but obviously tailored towards sport and also the local and the hyper local systems that are there, for it to actually fructify. So that's how we go about our consulting. As far as development is concerned, we generally do a lot of consulting with football clubs and state federations where, we help them create the structures in a sustainable manner. They can probably give the pathways to the players and, couple it with more of a holistic side of things. We were the first ones to do the baby league in the country as well. Which was in 2017, which was pretty late for our country, but yeah, we were the first ones, and now it's caught fire and more people are doing it, and that was the whole idea behind it, where more and more people do it, so there's more and more avenues for younger kids to play, and then at least we, from a global standpoint and even from an Asian standpoint, can bridge the gap that we had between the ages from 4 to 12, because whenever kids actually start taking up the sport a little seriously, they're already at a stage where they're starting something which they should have already known or already had competitive experience of, prior. So I think that's the gap, and that gap keeps going further and further and keeps increasing. So yeah, we try to touch on those points, and it's a slow game, but we are in it for the long run anyway. So yeah, that's more like it.
That's great to learn about. Yeah, definitely would want to touch upon that development side more.
Definitely we can do that, yeah.
But before that, I actually want to ask you a little bit more on the player management and talent representation side. So how do you make sure you're scouting the right talent, and where are you scouting the talent from just to represent?
From the outside, it looks very interesting, scouting and player agency and so on and so forth. Of course, in Europe, it's difficult to get into the football industry and it's difficult to get into the player management side and other things. But once you're in, the industry takes care of you. Whereas in India, it's easy to get in, but it's difficult to stay in. So you have to be really sure about what you're doing. You need to have the long-term perspective, and you need to have a lot of hands-on experience on the ground to really understand whether what you're doing and the time that you're spending is the input enough for the output or good enough for the output. So just in a nutshell, how we do our scouting is basically, first of all, have a good team, and it's built over time. I've also worked at clubs, at academies, and across the country. So for starters, I think knowing the ecosystem very well is very important. When I say ecosystem, you need to understand the national tiers, which is the second division, the first division, the ISL, as well as you need to know what states have the state leagues going and what is the level of the state leagues, so that you can do a comparison whether a player from this state league can actually make it and play well at the I-League level or the second division level or the ISL level. And there is a trajectory for that. So a Calcutta league would be very different from a Mizo league, would be very different from a Delhi league, would be very different from a Bangalore senior division. So you need to have an understanding of which level, what players have come from where, how their trajectories have gone, what their football education has been, how, what steps they need to take to actually bridge that gap to really reach those levels. then we have a good network of stakeholders. They could be people at clubs, they could be coaches who all want the better of the game. So, then that's when you do the background checks, you understand more about the player, more about the character. This is all simultaneously the point where we're trying to also get as many data points as possible if they are available. That's been a challenge in India. But that makes it interesting also, because that's where the subjective side comes into it. Your data is only as good as your interpretation of it. So when it comes to this, and then to bring it on to a similar wavelength, that's where the subjectivity comes. So these factors actually help a lot. Then we try to go for as many matches as possible. If there is a lot of video content available, we probably look at that as well, so that at least we know, okay, this is what we've seen. And now when we go and watch the games, we know exactly what to look at, because in the videos, they generally follow the ball. But when you're sitting and watching the games, you're following the game. So a lot of other things that you don't see on TV or on the videos come about, and it can give you a bit more deep dived insight into what the player is about. Then post that, we meet the player. We try to understand. I mean, if we are convinced, then we try to understand what aims and objectives and goals the player has, the way he thinks. Try to rationalize with him, and if we can come to, say, a common consensus as to the direction that we both want to go together in, and where the player also understands the steps that it could take for him to reach the highest levels, that's when we conclude and move on with the player.
Interesting. Thank you for defining that process. I think it's really important for us to kind of understand the process in which it flows, because like you said, everything seems really glamorous from the outside looking in, but so much work.
And also, this process, what I've told you is basically the steps that you would want to follow. You could probably think that, these are, from our perspective, maybe our key process, but sometimes it's not to the T. It is pretty ad hoc, because different states are different leagues are different. Sometimes the uncertainty and the volatility of the leagues, can take different turns. So we try to keep the balance, but the end goal is the same. So the steps vary, but we try to do as much as this as possible before we take that decision. Because, see, at the end of the day, we don't charge any money from the players. So our success is only primarily based on the success of the player. So if he does well, we do well. That's how it is.
But just in terms of the challenges that you face in this process, just in terms of collection of data or the lack of availability of it, or the lack of availability of videos, restrictions that each state has opposes on consultancies and agencies, how do you maneuver through those?
See, that's why the best is to be on the ground. That's the best. It's just that, India is a different beast altogether. India is a continent for me. It's like different cultures, different languages, different food, the topographies. It's not easy to reach. Going and watching a game in Shillong from Delhi, from door to door, is almost as much time I'd probably spend to travel from Delhi to Russia or to Moscow. So keeping that in mind, it's a challenge. But yeah, and state leagues, they are coming there. Some of them have come there. We can probably touch on that later. The AFF also is now getting the videos from a more serious standpoint out there. The data also from a more serious standpoint out there. So it's there. But again, the interpretation of it also suffers sometimes when you're not able to go and see the games. And that, like I said, traveling around sometimes can be a challenge, especially in the pandemic. It's been a challenge. But going forward, I think it should balance itself out. We are in the sports industry, so we feel it every day that a change should occur. But if somebody from the outside looks in, things have changed. And they are changing. It's a gradual and slow process, but it's moving in the right direction. So that's a positive.
So football is obviously the world's most popular sport, but in India it falls short to cricket, and that's just like any other sport does.
Sure.
So how do you make sure these players, especially during the pandemic, where there's a scarcity of resources or how much brands can spend on their marketing or sports marketing budgets, how do you make sure these players get a sustainable flow of income or sustainable flow of commercialization in the sport from your side?
To begin with, the pandemic, it definitely has been a challenge, because there is a lot of difference between how much you get paid at the top league and then the second league, which is the I League, and probably the second division after that. And there's been uncertainty about when the leagues will start. Coming back to your point from cricket is probably the most commercially viable sport in the country. As far as the cricketers are concerned, they are pretty well off when it comes to the endorsement side of things. And maybe you could say there are a handful of other athletes that also make a lot of money via, endorsements, individual athletes, not team athletes, because they've done well at a global level. So they get, those endorsements. As far as footballers are concerned, apart from, again, maybe 3, 4, maybe Sunil to a great extent, Bhaichung was there to an extent, and he's diversified. Others, from a commercial standpoint, are not really there. That's a challenge. We can touch upon that later. But at the same time, what football does is, if players have long-term contracts, then it automatically gives them that financial sustainability. So they have that security of playing in those clubs where they are stable financially, or at least they are in a system where gradually they are growing towards becoming better players, where they'll be able to earn better money. Like I said, it's been a challenge, but it's a tough one. And as far as endorsements and influencing is concerned, there's a thin line between it, because you have to be very strategic about it. Although India is booming it when it comes to the influencer side of things, and people are making money here and there on it, we have to really understand that football players are football players first and influencers second. It's not like they'll go out there and just sell any product, or they'll just go and do anything. It has to fall in line with their characters. It has to fall in line with what they do in their daily lives. It has to fall in line with their struggle. It has to resonate with the kind of audience that they would, either it'll be hyper local, either it'll be fitness oriented, either it'll be sports brands, and so on and so forth. So a lot of the sports brands that are prevalent in India are dependent on their global assets. Nike would be on Ronaldo, Adidas would be on Messi. So it becomes very difficult to really get these guys on board, pay them, and then leverage them enough, because the relatability to those big guys would be far greater than these. So that's a challenge. We are getting there slowly and steadily. I think the digital side of things is picking up for players. They are also getting very mature when it comes to putting out the kind of content that needs to go out there, so that brands can really see the tangible value in supporting them. So slowly that gap is getting bridged, but it's still going to take a little bit longer for them to reach the level of the cricketers. One, secondly, also to the level of the individual athletes that do well at a global level, because that's the pull. Indian football still has a long way to go when it comes to a comparative analysis to the European leagues, or even some of the best leagues in Asia, like the A League or probably the J League, and so on. Yeah. So it's going to get there, but from a sustainability point of view, at least they have some contracts where they have a steady flow of income. So if they can be smart about their money now, they can at least fight this pandemic and take it fresh and clean from hopefully next year or early next year onwards.
Hopefully at the earliest.
Yeah. We're all hoping for the same. Yeah.
From a social development standpoint, though, I would love for you to touch upon the foundation, which is the 8 Goals 1 Foundation that you run, and how is that planning to bridge the gap and build a more sustainable growth for football in India?
Our CSR initiative, the 8-1 Foundation, is based on these 8 goals, which are, I'll just broadly tell you: education, peace, gender equality, employment, nutrition, hygiene, and well-being. Okay. Now, obviously, all of them at the same time are difficult to, put in place for every project that you do. But we try to start off with a project which was the Young Legends League, which I told you was the first baby league in the country. We wanted to do it in areas where, accessibility was a problem, but culture was there. So the fertility was already there. So what we thought that, what we'll go and do is put the seeds of fruition there, and then see how it comes about. And we wanted to always keep a balance between development as well as technical excellence, so that it's a more holistic way of approaching it. Unfortunately, there are CSR in our country, or not-for-profit in our country, is looked at from a very charitable standpoint. Most of the companies, they try to do things which are directly in line with what they're doing. They don't really look at gap areas as such and see the long-term sustainability of the program as to how it can, survive on its own. So, and photo ops happen, and, all sorts of stuff which are in silos, which are one-offs. So there is these things, they don't happen overnight. You really can't change somebody's life in one night, or in one event, or in one initiative. It has to be something that is a long-term thing. So we thought, okay, how do we do that? And at the same time, keep the development, technical development going as well. So we started this league in Champai, Mizoram, which is 30 miles off the Myanmar border. If you land in Aizawl, which is the capital of Mizoram, it takes you 12 hours to reach this place through all the roads. And 12 hours, I can reach from Delhi to London, my house here, in 10 hours. So keeping that in mind, it's a journey. So we went there and we started this league for children between the age groups of 6 and 12. We're giving them more than 30 games. We are including the community there. We are getting the people from the community who are coaching them. We are getting the people from the community who are coordinating, who are organizing, who are volunteering. We've seen the fruits of labor also. 2 kids have been picked up by Bhaichung Bhutia Football Schools, the residential academy, which is in Delhi. Reliance has picked up a kid who's in Mumbai. Bengaluru FC made the effort to actually go all the way to Champai and scout and get 4 players, and they are in their setup, and they just played against, one of the kids played against his favorite team, Manchester United, in the Next Gen Cup last season when they came to India. So coming from an area like that, which is inaccessible, people don't even know about this place. They don't even know how Aizawl looks like for some of them. Giving them an avenue where now they have better lives in Delhi, Mumbai, and Bangalore, which are probably the top 3 places in our country from an educational, getting street smart, getting holistically developed side of things, has been a great proof of concept for us that this really is something that we want to go down. And we've signed 10-year MOUs with the state FA. We're already in our 3rd year. We were the first ones to start on baby league in Manipur as well. We started a little lower, so we were addressing the challenge of age cheating. We didn't want that to plague the game either, so we started lower. So we have 240 kids there. We've got 360 kids in Mizoram, and they are continuously playing. Of course, the pandemic has stopped that. This season was stopped midway, but hopefully it'll resume as soon as things get back to normalcy. And and from this, and by the way, we also have girls in the league. Every team is mandated to have at least 1, if not 2, 3, as many as they want. We had a lot of girls playing really well, doing really well. Unfortunately, there are not enough places for them to actually move out like the boys have done to residential academies elsewhere. And just now, there's not enough money in the game for parents to actually feel that this is a lucrative, career path. But the structures are not there. So I think we struggle with the structures mainly. So this was giving a structure to the pre-12 age group, keeping in mind all these things. We've seen the changes happening in their attendances at school. We've seen the kids really wanting to do whatever their parents ask of them during the week because they want to go and play at the weekend. Girls are playing. 2 girls have got picked from our Manipuri league into one of the state league teams that play the women's league also. They are 14, 15, so it's going to take them time since by when they can probably represent the senior. Every now and then when our team goes there, we take educational sessions. We educate them about the general, things that are plaguing the society, the social ills, and so on and so forth. So yeah, it's going well. I would say it's going well, and we really look. It's our baby, so we will definitely take care of it till the end. Yeah.
This is great to hear about, especially the gender equality aspects as well. I think just from a holistic growth standpoint.
See, it's not just about giving balls or goalposts and just leaving them there and let them happen on its own. You must have seen so many initiatives where some donation happens. Unless there is a program that is making full use of the money that's being spent, there's no point. And Messi wasn't Messi overnight, right? So at least in this program, if a kid is coming at the age of 5 or 6, at least he's in this setup till 12. And there is a tangible growth in his career or in his development, or there is an active chance of him being scouted and going and playing at a higher level. So that was one thing that we really wanted to focus on, where there is something tangible that comes about from this, rather than it being in a silo. And luckily, the stakeholders in the industry have appreciated that. They are supportive, at least from a point of view where they are willing to look at the talent and they are willing to invite the talent, which is in itself a big thing for those societies. And we wish to do more of these, but as and when time and finances allow.
Absolutely. There's actually a very interesting point you mentioned about kind of sustaining that and building that from the ground up and
So,
something tangible coming out of that. But do you think, or do you ever fear that this goes up to a certain point where, then the talent is out of your control, where you can kind of hone them up to a certain point and then they go to these state bodies and they may not sort of be conditioned the same way, or are the conditions changing where you see that the talent will be conditioned in the right way possible?
that's a great question, and I think that's the biggest challenge in our country right now because, like I said, India being such a big country and football, as you mentioned, football after cricket, football actually is a very high participative sport. Like in our country, there are cultural hubs where the participation levels are really high, even at the lowest age groups. What we wanted to show was a proof of concept. Like I said, once we started in 2017, post that, a lot of other states have also caught on to the fire and they've started their baby leagues as well. Now, we can only do so much. Of course, other people have to see the value in this and have to, support this sustenance. But I completely agree with you because after 12, we plan to now do an under 15 league where at least the kid stays in the system if he is not able to go out. But I'm only talking about a place like Champai, which is in the middle of nowhere. People don't even know where it is. Or Vishnupur in the middle of Manipur where people don't know about it. India is huge. Now, every state has to do this. That's the difference between us and the Western world, right? Like, no matter where you are, what level you're at, you're always competitive. There is always something happening. There is always something to play for. And the society is, is very supportive of it and is very it's inclusive, and they all want to be a part of it. Now, unfortunately, in some of the metro cities, just the way the lifestyles are, that takes a toll.
Yeah.
But at least in these areas where the distraction levels are lower and people are more towards these things, it can happen, and these are the talent hubs of the country. So I think where there is culture, if you can give it a little bit of a structure, automatically you'll see the nurturing happening. That's our mantra, just give culture a structure to see the nurturing, if you know what I mean. I don't know, to give you a random example, you've seen this show Cobra Kai, right?
Yeah.
Or you've probably heard of it.
Yeah.
Karate Kid came in 1984.
Yeah.
They had karate competitions where everybody was so inclusive at the school levels and stuff, and it was so much rivalry. Where do I see that in India? We need to have that to actually make the sport sustainable, because how do you make it sustainable? There need to be people who are consuming it. Absolutely. And then various forms of consumption will only fuel the monetary side of things, and that's how you sustain. CSR projects can give you the pillars. They can, lay the foundation, but it has to be coupled with something which is commercially a little viable. Otherwise, it'll lose its way anyway before the kid even gets out of the system. So that's an area which we are working very hard on and trying to see, what innovative ways we can come about and, give it a more complete circle. So let's hope.
I also want to touch upon this initiative that was ran by World1 Sports, because sports is such a powerful tool that can be leveraged to cover key issues of society. And I feel like India somewhere lacks that, where the world stage, we're sort of still able to imbibe more and raise awareness for integral issues going on in society. But World1 Sports ran a very key initiative on racism in India. Can you touch upon that and expand on how that came about?
Racism is a big problem in India. It's just not our campaign was more towards the Northeast, and it's not just a World1 perspective because we have players from the Northeast. It's also because Northeast was my first love when I came back from England, and I saw the potential there, and I just loved the place, and it just became my own. It's my second home, more than Delhi. I think it's just not with the Northeastern people, even the North Indians with the South Indians, the West Indians, and it's all over the place. And it pains me to even think about this, that we can be so naive about these things. But from a personal standpoint, I have a lot of friends in the Northeast, from a lot of the states, from Meghalaya, from Assam, from Manipur, from Nagaland, from Mizoram, everyone. And this pandemic has just spiked this whole thing up, and it's really shameful to see this. And people from the Northeast have really done enough for our country, whether it's in sport or whether it's in the armies and so on and so forth. So I really don't see why people can't just, for a moment, take a deep breath and just see it in an objective way and just come about this. Our campaign, it was, I mean, we can probably do more, and we would want to do more, but we don't want it to be uh, like forced or anything. But this was something that was very close to our hearts, and our players also felt very strongly about, and that's why we came about with this. And I think more and more campaigns such as this, not just by us, by everyone out there, must be undertaken, because at the end of the day, they are more an integral part of our country than anyone else. So it's really shameful. It's really shameful. But yeah, I mean, we'll keep doing more campaigns where we can raise awareness about different issues, not just racism.
Mm.
We will. You will see in the future. We have something in the pipelines.
Look forward to that for sure. On the other side, just shifting gears a little bit, more on the fan engagement and development side, we see eyeballs in India. People want to invest, especially now with the tie-ups that every foreign league is having or investing in India, in Indian properties in the ISL. But we also talk about leveraging these eyeballs eventually from a monetary standpoint. Do you think India is far behind in building enough of a brand value for our teams, where we can create other verticals around merchandising or content that can be leveraged and monetized?
Oh, this is a very interesting question, and this is something that we really like. The whole team, everyone really feels strongly about. But yeah, there's a long way to go. It's a challenge.
Mm.
Just to start the conversation, I think when you meant fan engagement, when you meant commercializing the eyeballs and so on and so forth, just in general, like sport, and I think the best example, if I don't look at American sports as such, and if I don't go down the college sports side, school sports side of things in America, which is a completely different beast, and if you look at football in Europe or other places, South America, and other parts of Asia, what are the 4 or 5 ways in which you can really monetize? Broadcast, everybody would say that. Sponsorship, merchandise, gate revenue, mm, what transfer fees, prize money, right? Apart from, let's say, transfer fee and prize money, your merchandise, your gate revenue, your broadcast, and your sponsorship, all four are dependent on only one person. That's the fan, right?
Yeah.
So if you don't monetize, like that is the key way to sustain. Now, if you look at the Western countries and the Western teams and so on and so forth, they've been there forever. So they were there when there was no digitization. They were there when there was no TV. People used to go to the games. They used to monetize. That culture is there. Now, it's a long way to go. But where the culture is, I think those areas, the club should need to look very carefully and put the right processes or activation engagements so that they can, get just that eyeball a little more engaged. Because at the end of the day, it's okay. So why does everybody sponsor cricket? Because for them, for the brands or the sponsors, it's a great cause for eyeball justification, right? Because they spend an X amount of money and they get a huge number of eyeballs. When it comes to football or other sports, there's not much. At least the ISL teams now have moved from being just franchisees. They are trying to become clubs. The league has become longer. They've added another team. They probably want to add more teams. So the calendar will become longer. So it gives them more room to engage their fans on the ground as well as digitally. What the pandemic has helped now is more and all the clubs are now looking at digital more. So all the fans that even are, the slightest of touch points to them from a potential fan perspective, where they could be monetized in the long run, or at least be engaged in the long run, could be very lucrative for brands. So I think now this pandemic, if used in the proper way, can really catalyze their digital side of things, the clubs, and then that will flow down to the on-ground engagement that they do once things get back to normal. Because at the end of the day, they need the fans to come into the stadium. Even games in England are not the same without the fans. Like, it's just like the repeat of the same. Like, you're just watching a drab game and the same kind of content keeps coming out. Of course, the fans have that loyalty, and they've always stayed with the clubs, so they're there. But in India, we started from scratch. It's a 6-year-old league. We had the I League from before, but if ISL is not going to be monetary sustainable, how do you expect the leagues lower than that becoming sustainable? And the calendars are the key part, because you need a long calendar for long-term engagement. And I feel that right now the Indian fan with the world the way it's going, the the amount of attention that you can seek from a fan is really tough, because there's just so much happening. Like, you've got your phones, you've got your computers, you've got your TVs, you've got 1,000 other things happening. So, a potential fan doesn't spend as much time as an older fan would have on sport, and how they would have deep dived into the sport, because there's just too many distractions. And I think that's going to be the biggest challenge for us as a nation, to get the people engaged. So the best way to go about that is not the top down, but the bottom up, or bit of both, because the ISL is already doing that. You are giving broadcast time for a potential sponsor to come in for prime time, right? That's the way it's working, right? People are still not buying merchandise. Cricket also struggled to sell merchandise. Gate revenue, yes, cricket does. Cricket is a religion in our country, so let's not compare everything to cricket. Football, okay, some places in the country, yeah, okay, people pay and they come and watch the games. Kerala has seen that. Bangalore has done it with a niche. They're doing a great job on digital. Goa is trying. So clubs are there, they're trying as much as they can. But I feel for engagement levels, the way the culture is imbibed in the places that we always use as examples, it's a 100-year-old legacy. They've gone through different times, in the development of the sport, and they all started a little bit ground up. So why would I want to come and watch a game? I want to be engaged with the club at the lowest levels. So if I have some structures at the ground where I have access to the club in some way or the other, I would have that relatability with the club. And that way, my parents are related, my friends are related. I would probably have played with some player in the under 12 league or something who's actually made it into the senior league. So that engagement level is there. So there need to be enough touch points and engagement points throughout, the age groups, and for everybody, which are not in silos, not happening every year, but it has to be a part of a longer play, where then after 5-6 years, everybody is relating it in the same way as the Western countries do. And that's when the top down of the broadcast and sponsorship will meet the bottom up halfway. And that's when we can probably be in a better place when it comes to the fan engagement side of things. So it's getting there. People are trying different things. The audience is not an easy nut to crack. There is no best practice. Every state has a different challenge. Every state has a different audience. Every state, the culture for football is different. East Bengal and Mohun Bagan coming into the ISL will really help others understand the passion of the numbers that come with that, and they can probably learn from that or banter with them and take it to the next level. So I'm hoping for a positive change, and I hope we can play an integral part in this going forward. But yeah, this is what it is. In a nutshell, this is what will make us sustainable, and this is what we all should work towards.
Very well said. My next section is a rapid fire that I've introduced just to kind of get your take on a few pertinent factors related to learning and skills in general. So these are going to be 4 questions, and would be great to get your answers on these.
I'll try.
So number 1, what book would you recommend on becoming a better leader, a manager, or a learner?
Sporting books or what? I generally don't read books to learn these things. I think it's best to get hands-on experience. But if you really when you say leader, you probably want to get the best out of the people and motivate them as much. So I would probably give you 2, which is a spectrum, and people can just read both and get around. One would be Che Guevara, okay, A Life of a Revolutionary, and the other would be Quiet Leadership by Carlo Ancelotti. So I think if you read them too, you get a good spectrum of how you need to become a leader.
3 skills you would recommend for a better career in the sports industry?
I think a hands-on approach would be integral, so that you get as much experience of even the minutest of things. You have to go through that journey. You can't really start off on the rosy side of things. You need to be hands-on everything. Effective communication. I think that's also key, because if you communicate well, then you can network well, and which also is a big part of sports. And organization, because sport has a lot of moving parts, and if you are organized, then you can, with your hands-on approach, always cater to all of them in a better way. And if you communicate well, then you can be organized. So I think if these 3 things you can probably bring together, you've got the perfect sports manager.
One word that describes the Indian sports ecosystem according to you?
Potential.
Interesting. Last question.
I mean, we are working in it. I mean, what do you expect me to say? Obviously, that's to be
That's a
potential.
very appropriate word for the Indian sports ecosystem. There's just so much untapped opportunity. My last question is, how do you keep yourself motivated to work and innovate in the sports industry?
Okay, so we are at all these ages where we are in it for the long run at the end of the day. And as I mentioned before, potential, we'll try to see where we can, go with that. And we want to put our heart, mind, and soul into it completely. As you notice, we are giving equal importance to the development side as well as to the commercial side of things. So I think hand in hand, if we can crack that recipe, I would want more and more people to follow that, but in a more how should I say, transparent, non-corrupt, and sustainable manner, where we all can work towards making the pie bigger for everybody rather than just keep eating from the same pie and demotivating anybody who really wants to get into the sport. We need to be very careful about this. Otherwise, we'll still be at the same place after 5 years.
What's next for you and World1 Sports coming out of this pandemic?
Well, first of all, we're all hoping to get out of the pandemic. And as far as things are concerned now, we are looking to, I would not say pivot or something, but just try to deep dive into other areas which we can leverage and synergize with our existing assets. But at the same time, we are looking at our back end and we're trying to streamline things, and we're trying to get everybody upskilled to a certain level where once the pandemic is over, everybody can just use that as a launch pad to go into different areas and try to work on the low hanging fruits, and then build, just add that to whatever we were working on and catalyze the whole process. But if you really ask me in general, I mean, we'll keep doing what we're doing. And I think we will definitely focus a bit more on the digital side of things, whether it's with the athletes or whether it's with the clubs or it's with the other clients, and try to see how we can use that to educate, engage, and help in showing the value of data to help sustain in the future.
Great. Thank you so much. That brings me to the end of my questions. And this was almost like a boot camp, taking us through, such different aspects of football. Thank you for covering everything.
Thank you so much.
Thank you everybody for tuning in. At the Sportsbiz Show, the aim is to get you the best interviews, trends and tips from the world of sports business. It will be really helpful if you could subscribe and rate the podcast. This would go a long way in helping the show get discovered and add value to more sports biz enthusiasts and professionals like yourself. Please feel free to connect on LinkedIn or Instagram. Links will be in the description. Thank you, and until next time, keep the Josh high.